Welcome to Generation Truth Podcast with Carey and Rebekah Charles.
Where we declare the Lord is good, His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endureth to all generations.
God's view of singleness is what we're going to talk about today. Rebekah actually was listening to Scott Pauley, and there was some things that he mentioned out of 1 Corinthians 7 that really talk about God's view of singleness.
Yes, actually, so me and my friends were going to attend this little retreat, and then it snowed, so I had to listen to these things through some video lecture thing, and I took a lot of time, honestly. I was teaching, and I thought, I don't know if I want to do this, but it helped me so much understand this purpose that God had for me while I was single. And so if you want to jot these things down in your Bible, that's exactly what I did. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is where we'll be. And so it starts here in verse 27. Here it says, "Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife." And so as Scott Pauley was speaking here, he made a statement that said, each season of life, marriage or being single, is the best. If you are in God's will, or the best stage of life is the stage where you are in the center of God's will.
Yes,
and that means
absolutely.
Either if you are single, well, then that's the best. If you're married and you are in God's will, well, that's the best. And so each one is the best. And that brought such comfort to my heart to know that, you know what, stop wishing to be married or stop wishing for a life that God hasn't chosen for me. Being single is the best thing for my life because that is what God has chosen for me.
Yeah, because, I remember when I was single, I was like, man, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Only married people there, they have the companionship. They have so much more, it seems like. And then you get married, and then there's certain things like, well, now I can't go out and play those games as much, or I can't go hang out with those people as much as I want to. There are actually pros and cons to both, as we like to say, but really you can thrive in both. Both are wonderful. Right.
And one other thing here, the gift of singlehood does not mean that you're incomplete. A lot of people think, well, I'm not married yet, so that means I'm incomplete. Because after all, God did say in His word that it was not good for man to be alone. So if I am alone, does that mean I'm incomplete? No, God does not create things in fractions. He creates a whole being.
Yes.
And so, this gift of singlehood does not mean that you're incomplete. And here in verse 6 of that same chapter, that's literally what it says. It says, "For I would that all men were even as myself." At this point in Paul's life, he was single, but every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner and another after that. And I love his attitude here. He's saying, you know what? Some people are married, some are not. But since when are we defined by our stage of life? Yes, humans tend to put people in these categories. Well, he's married. She's not. She's married. He's not. Right? And we kind of compartment people. But God does not see us that way. "I say, therefore, to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn." And so, again, this gift of singlehood, indeed, it is a gift. I had a lady tell me that singleness is a gift. It's meant to be given away. And at first I thought, well, I didn't even ask for this gift. This is not something that I chose. But again, as I learned God's view for me in this season, it did become a gift. And so, as Carey said, here, verse 28, we're jumping down again. There are complexities both of marriage and singlehood. So according to Scott Pauley, he said, maximize the positives, both of marriage and of being single, and minimize the negatives. Each of them have negatives. And of course, when one of us is in the stage of life, then we tend to think, oh man, I really wish I were single to just have a minute to myself. Of course, when we're not married, I wish I were married. We're always wanting to be in the stage of life that we're not, right?
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like when you're 12, you want to be 16. And when you get 16, you want to be 18. When you get 18, you want to be 21. You're just never content with that. But we really should be, because God designed us to be.
Right. And again, going back to our last podcast, each of us are to be set apart to be singly focused on Jesus, whether we are married or single.
Yes.
And that is kind of another thread theme in this chapter, that we are all called to be set apart. And here in Scripture, God is saying, look, if you're single, you have the positive of not worrying about children or a husband or cooking or for a whole family or cleaning an entire house. So you can devote yourself to being holy unto the Lord. And so all of those verses here state that clearly. Moving on here, God gives us commands. And at first, those seem to be rather difficult to fulfill, but God's commands are his enablings. And so if God has chosen you to be single, or you feel as if that singleness is a gift, well, he's going to enable you the power to be able to fulfill that.
Obeying God without distraction should be the single purpose of every life. We should, as a single person, we often think, man, like I said, I want to be married, but as a single person, you actually get the opportunity to spend more time with your church family. You get to spend more time serving in different areas at church that you probably wouldn't have been able to do if you were married, because you got to schedule things with your wife. You got to make sure that your kids are taken care of if you have kids. Whereas a single person, you actually have a little bit less, and family's not a distraction. They're not.
Right.
But family is another priority that takes place in your life. So as a single person, you should take advantage of the fact that you do not have those other things in your life, so that you can focus more on getting more involved in your local church in different areas.
Right. And that, I believe, is God's specific calling, specific purpose for this season, stage, lifetime of singleness. And that is not to say that being single is a less busy time. I used to really get annoyed when I was teaching and I'd be like really busy, and then people would say, oh, well, you don't have kids, so you must have all the time in the world, when really I was just as busy as moms or whatever.
Yeah.
So
you're extremely busy because you're doing more, not more, but you're doing a lot more, maybe actively going a lot of different places,
right.
and stuff like that.
It's said, don't be busy, be invested. And if you are investing your life the way that God has designed for you, well, then, you're going to have a very busy, invested life, which is what God designed for us to do. So
let's talk about the benefits of singlehood. This is something that we don't really talk about, honestly, in our churches, but what are the benefits of being single?
So there are so many. And at first, if you're listening to this and you're not married, you're like, okay, well, just list one of them. Well, we've already given some of them. Again, God desires that we are set apart for him. So the biblical word for set apart is consecrate. We are to be consecrated to God and then concentrated on him as well. So if we are only set apart to God without having our eyes on him, then being single can get really hard, because we're just busy, being invested in others' lives, but we're not filling up our tank with how beautiful this relationship with Jesus can and should be. Then it's going to be hard to fulfill this purpose of being holy unto the Lord as God desires. So we have to, again, be set apart to God, but then also concentrated on him. And again, here are some benefits. It's just the Lord and I. Don't have family. We are married. We love being married.
Yes, we love
it's
family.
Not that, but we also can testify that
trying to do your God nighttime with a little
17-month-old.
Yes, it's a little hard.
Gracious. It takes me 4 hours sometimes to get through my God nighttime. Here's another great benefit. I can live for eternity, not for time. That's verse 29 here, which reads, "But this I say, brethren, the time is short. It remaineth that both they that have wives be as though they had none." In other words, if you have a wife, well, you're to live as if you had none, because time is short. We're to live for eternity. Well, if you don't have a husband, you don't have a wife, you don't have that priority, right? We can live for eternity, invest in eternal things instead of time, like working to get food on the table and raising children and all. Those things take time, right? And in those things, that's also bringing glory in God's kingdom in their own rank. But another one, we can live for the Lord's pleasure instead of another's. Verse 32 here. But I would not have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. And again, we can live for one thing instead of many. Verse 35. And this I speak for your own profit, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely, and that ye may attend upon the Lord again without distraction. So again, family is not a distraction.
But it is something that you have to think about in your life. When you're trying to just do daily life, you do have a lot more that you have to, or you have a different priorities as a married person than as a single person. And this is a season as a single person that you can really focus on developing your relationship with the Lord. You have a little more time to do your God and I time than you might if you had a 1-year-old in your path. And those different things. And so the best season of your life is the one where you're living in God's will. Whether you're married or not, God has a special plan for you, and he wants you to fulfill that plan by thriving to get to know him and making him known and really enjoying what God has for your life. So let's get to know the truth so we can live the truth, so we can give the truth.
Because God's truth endures to all generations.